Hi, HRN listeners. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we have a really fun campaign and an ask for you. This 15th anniversary tour is aiming to bring you closer to unique food and music experiences in some of the most exciting cities in America. All the while, we're raising funds to support our work empowering the next generation of food systems storytellers through our fellowship programs. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and be entered into a raffle in the city of your choice to win a dinner for two at a noteworthy restaurant and tickets for two to a concert at a prominent local venue. We have incredible partners in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Asheville, and Ardmore, Pennsylvania, who have donated a meal for two and two tickets to a concert of the winner's choice. And all donations help fund our fellowship programs, where we're helping to build essential workforce readiness skills and food system storytelling skills. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni. I'm the host. This is our 14th year with Heritage Radio Network. We've got a special show today. Often we think about thoughtful and impactful people in the world of beer and spirits and hospitality. And very often they're writers and editors, and I have a lot of respect for these two people. So let's our guests introduce themselves. Start with Jeff and then Kate.
Hey, Jimmy, I'm Jeff Cioletti. I am the author of several books, most recent one being Imbibing for Introverts, and I'm also editor-in-chief of Craft Spirits magazine.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us. And,
Thank you.
I think every single one of your books, with the exception of one, you've come on to Beer Sessions Radio with. So your new book's out, Imbibing Introverts, and it's a great impetus for the show. And that's why Kate's here too. Hey, Kate.
Hey, Jimmy. Hi, Jeff. It's really nice to be here. I am Kate Bernot. I am a Missoula, Montana-based freelance reporter. I primarily cover beer, alcohol, and food sometimes. And I am also the director of the North American Guild of Beer Writers. All
right. And I that's how I know you. I think during the pandemic, I joined that organization, and I found a lot of good stories and some great contacts with it. So thanks for what you do, Kate. I really appreciate the North American Guild of Beer Writers.
Of course, and we're glad you joined us. It is not, writers is a broad term. We also have podcasters and other, and newsletter writers and things like that. So we take a very broad view of writing. It's really more storytelling. So yeah, I'm glad you find value in it, and I'm glad you're a member, Jimmy.
Well, thank you. So I think we're going to start talking about both of you guys as writers, in the world of spirits and beer, and editors. Jeff, a little background on you. I remember when you were the editor of my favorite magazine, Beverage World.
Yes, that was a lifetime ago. And I know that you were very intrigued by all of the delivery truck content that I had in the magazine. And every time I was on, you wanted me to talk about it. And good, I'm kind of glad I'm not there anymore, because now I have an excuse not to talk about trucks anymore.
Well, at the time when I had the beer pub, Jimmy's Number 43, it was probably the only thing I could relate to. I wasn't a distributor. I wasn't dealing with a lot of packaged products. But those trucks delivering kegs, I've got a lot of respect for them. So. Yeah,
especially in New York. I mean, I don't even know how they make it down the street. You'd have to find parking just to deliver the stuff.
Well, one time with Justin Kennedy, he pitched a story where the photographer Matt Coates followed the other half when they were just starting about a year in New York, and basically spent a day with their delivery guy and seeing all the places in New York they had to deliver a keg of beer, and some of them were literally vertical drops that they had to like lower down on ropes into old basements. So
Oh, geez.
it's quite a yeah. It's not pulling up at a Costco or something. Um, but then so you've written all these books as well. I mean, you're a full time editor and writer. Um, what powers your the books that you're writing, because you've written some really cool ones. You got more into travel and spirits and cocktails.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of I feel like the trajectory that I've always been on is, I guess you could say I'm sort of a wannabe travel writer, and all my expertise is in beverages, and I travel for booze basically, and um, so this one especially, I feel like I'm trying to veer more into that travel writing zone, kind of mixed with sort of memoirish kind of stuff, and that's kind of where Imbibing for Introverts came about, because I do travel a lot, but I also travel alone a lot, especially when I'm traveling for work. So I'm often drinking alone, and I've come to really love it. And you know, I just remember sitting in a bar in Portland, Oregon, and coming up with this idea, because I was like, this is like, because it was the sort of bar that I'd just like to be left alone and just sort of drink and contemplate. And I'm like, I'm an introvert. I love not being bothered by people. So it was just sort of that. And I really have come to sort of enjoy my own company over the years, and that's kind of where that came from.
What is a bar, or a tasting room that you like to be in?
Um, you want one specific, or do you want like the
Yeah.
sort of place? Well, okay. I would say, well, my default is always a tiki bar, only because, and if you want to know specifically which one, I would say Frankie's Tiki Room in Las Vegas is one of my favorite places on earth, because I'm always in Vegas at least once a year for some sort of work thing, and I don't necessarily like to do the whole Vegas thing, but somebody sort of introduced me to that bar, Frankie's Tiki Room, because I knew I was in tiki bars. It's off the strip. It's kind of isolated. It's open 24 hours, and it's really dark, and it's got all your usual tiki paraphernalia, but it's also got like video gambling machines and whatnot too. But it's just a place I love to go, just sit and have a drink. Like if I'm there, 3 o'clock in the afternoon is like the best time to go. I just grab this little corner mini table and just sit there, and I just keep ordering, and can't really read anything. I probably spend a lot of time on my phone, but you can't really read a book because it's too dark unless it's Kindle. But other than that, it's just such a wonderful place, and they have the best jukebox I've ever found too, because it's like I'm really into surf rock, and they have a jukebox basically full of surf rock. So that's a rather long answer, but that's
No, it's a good one. Sometimes you want to go into a bar as a refuge, right? Somewhere you can just get
exactly.
your
And you
thoughts
do feel
together.
shut off from the world. There's no windows. It's just
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got your book open, Imbibing for Introverts. Thanks for the copy. You know, since let's say it's the afternoon wherever we are, and we're in that bar that you like so much, and you're sitting by yourself, what drink from the book would we be drinking first?
Well, if we were at Frankie's Tiki Room, I have a drink from there in here. Let me find the page. It's called, I think it's something Dragon. Give me a second here.
Yeah, I got the book in front of me, and it's got some really nice cocktails in it.
Yeah, sorry, Surf Dragon is what it's called. Yeah, that's basically gold rum, 151 proof rum, some violet liqueur, Carpano Bianco dry vermouth, orgeat syrup, lemon juice, Fee Brothers bitters, strawberry nectar, ice, pineapple, and Luxardo cherry to garnish. So there's a lot going on there, but that's came in a really cool mug that you can take home if you spend an extra $20 on it.
Wow. That sounds worth it, right?
Yeah, it's boozy too, so you don't want really more than one or two of those.
Yeah. Well, that's a great intro. I always enjoy your books. I remember you're a creative guy as well as I'm not saying editors aren't creative, but I know you're creative. And I remember you made a movie about a beer church. Do you remember
Yeah,
what was the name of that?
spirituality.
That was pretty neat, right? The world had banned beer except if you had a church or something.
Yeah, no, it wasn't really the world. It was just that town. But that was, yeah, that feels like that was a lifetime ago too. Um, but yeah, that was a fun little project, and I keep meaning to get that up online somewhere so people can just watch it for free because I was really protective of it for a lot of years. Now I just, for the hell of it, just want to throw it up. It's just a matter of taking the time to upload it to YouTube.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, and thanks for joining us. And Kate, we might as well stay with that theme. I'm sure you travel a lot, or what are some places you like to drink, and are you an introvert too?
I'm so glad you asked me that question because I wanted to tell Jeff that in 2013, when I was still writing for a publication in Chicago called Red Eye, I wrote a column called The Necessary Art of Drinking Alone. So I think Jeff and I are on the same wavelength here. But just might be a writer's thing. I think writers are kind of solitary creatures deep down, even though Jeff and I are wonderfully social people. I think our
Yeah, when we
natural
have to be, or
habitat
at least when I have to be.
I think our natural habitat is somewhere alone on a bar stool. I think so. Maybe I'll stick with the Chicago theme there because I lived there for a number of years and get back there pretty frequently for work. Generally, I'm traveling solo, even though I have many good friends still in Chicago. And I had such a wonderful experience last time I was back there. I was actually on my way to dinner and it started downpouring. And I had like half an hour before I had to be at dinner. So quickly ducked into one of my favorite bars anywhere, the Hop Leaf, Belgian style restaurant and bar in
Cheers,
Chicago.
Michael.
Yes, cheers, Michael Roper. And I snagged a bar stool by myself, kind of in the corner. It was just a rainy day and kind of gross. And, ordered a really great Czech dark lager from Art History Brewing and kind of settled in by myself in the corner. And I just thought, this is the best way to kill half an hour. Like, what more could I want? The guy next to me ended up kind of chatting me up and we talked about beer. He wasn't sure what to order. We had a good conversation. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of putting yourself on a bar stool alone and sort of seeing what happens.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, you got to spend time. It's neat that certain bars can be something at different times of day and having different
Absolutely.
spaces. I do love your chapter, Jeff, the English pub, because I always kind of feel like English and Irish pubs, you may think that they're rowdy, but they've got a lot of divisions. They've got dividers in between seating and some dividers at the bar. And, sometimes I just want to get a little corner somewhere and have that drink. And these days it's use my phone, but sometimes just get my thoughts together, or go through a to-do list. And, you need those places where you can do that in different times of day, and it's tricky. There's like that time of day when coffee bars are closing and
Mhm.
happy hour starts, and you got to find the right place. How about you, Jeff?
Absolutely. What about me?
Well, you got a great chapter here about the English pub,
Oh,
and
the English pub. Yeah, and it's interesting because right at this moment I'm in London, but coming home tomorrow. But the whole reason I wanted to include that was because I wanted, the London pub is probably, it's pretty much or it has been historically the social center of British life. And well, what about going alone when you're not really, you don't really have that opportunity to be that social? Can you sort of drink socially by yourself without being part of a group or without, watching the footy game on TV or whatever, and just kind of just doing it on your own. And then I kind of like sort of approaching it in that context, because I had always, over the years, the times I've been in London, it's always been like a social thing. And I did realize that it is really conducive to just kind of sitting by yourself. Even at the most crowded times, you can always find like a very tiny table to sit at. And, no one really gives you weird stares. You just kind of can just sit there and be. And you never get sort of the bum's rush that you always feel like you're getting in places in America if they have to turn a table or something like that. But there, it's just like, you can nurse a pint for hours, with a book. And, sure, it gets really, really crowded at certain times right after work and whatnot. But as long as you grab a table, I mean, you're fine.
Kate, do you have any good English pub memories?
Ooh,
Have you been?
I've only been to London once, actually, which is far too few of visits. But I do think there is something about, like you're saying, the English style pub that invites that kind of time, solo. And I mean, even the beer styles that are served there just seem sort of designed for lingering a little bit, cask ale and all of that. And yeah, I'm just jealous of Jeff being in London, I guess.
Hey, if I remember correctly, weren't you there right as the Brexit vote happened? I seem to remember you going there that week, like in 2016 or whatever
I'm
it was.
so amazed that you remember that. I actually landed the day that the Brexit referendum was approved. It was the most surreal time to be there. Obviously, there was just a lot of chaos. The dollar was really strong. I guess that was nice, but it was a very interesting time to be there, to say the least. We had some very heated, conversations at bars and dinner parties with folks about about Brexit, and who could have foreseen how it would all go years later. But yeah, definitely quite a historic time to visit, that is for sure.
It's making England an introverted country. No.
Always on theme, Jimmy.
Oh yeah. And then on the next page in the book, here we go, next section, The Emerald Isolation, Alone in Ireland. You want to talk about that chapter? There looks like a cool pub here called the Ibby or something. Iggy, 1661. I can't read it.
Oh yeah, 1661. It's they specialize in poitín. Poitín. It's Irish moonshine.
Oh yes.
It's kind of making a bit of a comeback. Well, I mean, it's only really been legal for 25 years now. It was illegal for like 300 years, but that's their specialty there. And I kind of went on the last Irish trip when I was writing this chapter. I kind of wanted to focus on that a lot, and I was actually doing a lot of kind of Boilermaker kind of things too, where I would just pair a poitín with a pint of Guinness or something like that, or the local brewery's beer or whatever there. So that was, that's what that was about. And again, I think it was sort of a similar theme to the English pub thing, where Irish, legendary drinking culture. How do you sort of hang out there by yourself? Even as a foreigner, just in that space drinking alone. And there are a lot of great places to do that. And it was weird because the time that I went, it was in August of 2021, and things had literally just opened there. I remember it was one bar called the Long Hall. It's basically a long hall, and they the server, I'd asked her, so I'm like, "Oh, you just opened?" And she was like, "Yes, we were closed for 476 days," and so it was a strange time. So
wow. Oh, and I see you've got a poutine cocktail on page 178. You want to now the cocktails in the book, are these your versions, or are these that you're taking these from other places?
Oh, they're mostly ones that I've collected from other people. I've had a lot of like bars uh, sort of contribute them. I mean, there are probably 7 or 8 cocktails in this book that I kind of created on my own, but the vast majority are ones that were developed by, really, really pro mixologists, people who've got like big followings, like for instance, Tess Posthumous, who's a really well-known bar owner in Amsterdam. She contributed a couple things to this, which was amazing. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could say I curated them from a lot of different sources.
It's nice. Your books definitely stay on my shelf, and I like to go back and look through them. And again, this has got a travel theme. It's got England and Ireland. Um, i- i- is there a brewery that you like in London, or is there a place that you're seeking out, or you would seek out?
Well, actually, I tend to stay near whenever I'm over here. I tend to stay at the same place, and I'm really close. I don't know if you heard of the Bermondsey Beer Mile. It's kind of it's in the
Yes.
neighborhood of Bermondsey. Well, yeah, I'm about 3/4 of a mile from that. So, there's a whole range of them. Like Colonel was probably one of the older, better known ones, and then um, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There's God, I'm drawing a blank on most of the names now, uh, but yeah, I just did that on Saturday. Actually, I popped in. They always have this big food market outside in that area, so you kind of just pop into whatever brewery's open and grab a pint.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Hey, Kate, since we're again talking about beer writers and spirits writers, let's talk about you and the North American Guild of Beer Writers. Um,
My favorite topic.
yeah, how'd you get involved in it? And the community, the work that you're doing, because I think that all kind of ties together with this.
Yeah. The North American Guild of Beer Writers has existed for decades in some form, since well before I could legally drink or was writing about beer. So I feel very indebted to a long line of people who, helped create the guild and sustain it for so long. Um, our I got involved as a member, gosh, a few years ago, and found it really invaluable. It's a professional development organization, first and foremost. So it's there to provide, educational opportunities, networking opportunities, um, ways to further beer writers' knowledge about both journalism and beer. And those are important passions of mine. I've went to school for journalism. I've been a journalist my whole career, and I've been writing about beer almost that long. So it was suggested that I become the director when our most recent director, Brian Roth, stepped down. And it was a really great honor to take on that role. And I mean, I've been lucky throughout my career to be supported and mentored by people who knew a lot more than I did, and even people like Jeff, who I've known for years, have really been people that I know I can go to with questions about the industry and about writing books and about which publications are good to write for, and it's I've been indebted to people that share that knowledge with me. So now this position is a way to hopefully give a tiny bit of that back and to continue learning from our other members. So yeah, we do virtual happy hours. We have a newsletter. We have in-person meetups at beer conferences like the upcoming Craft Brewers Conference. And we have a Slack channel where we share, questions and sources and interesting things we've read with each other. It's a great crew. We have about, I think, close to 200 members now, and North American is in the title, but people actually live all over the world who are members. So it's a really dynamic group, and I think everyone's really quite a lot of fun actually in the group.
I got more involved in it during the pandemic with some of the online seminars and sessions, and that's how I met Jesse Boussard and
Yeah.
Emily Hudo of Radcraft Beer, and got more involved with craft malt.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I'll actually be going up to Portland, Maine, to the craft malt conference. But
Awesome.
that's really all. That's a North American Guild of Beer Writers connection. And actually, with all the
Love that.
talk, we're talking about trends too. With all the talk about how breweries have to survive, or you know what they're making besides beer. Um, because of that connection, I found a lot of great stories covering craft malt. To me, that's like been the most interesting part of beer for me in the world of at least podcasts.
That's
And
awesome.
I'll be
Yeah.
there recording a couple shows. So I
That's
don't
so cool.
think that I don't think I think to me, and I don't usually tell my feelings, but I feel like it's infinite just by getting into the ingredients and talking about them and seeing the beers that can be made. And I still really love, like in New England, there's Exhibit A Brewing, for example, or there's Kent Falls, and you know breweries that are using large amount of craft malt. I think they're thoughtful. I'm talking about thoughtfulness, but I actually I like the beers, and I find I never get tired of it. So I don't know if you guys, because Jeff, you're writing for Craft Spirits. Do you guys want to talk for a minute about craft malt? Because to me, it's
Happy
it's
to.
it's important. You can start, Kate, if you want.
Yeah, well, I'll be also tuning in, although virtually, to the Craft Malt Conference later this week. I wish I was up in Maine with everyone, but geographically a little far from me here in Missoula. But yeah, I guess I'll share a fun experience with Craft Malt recently. Just 2 weekends ago, I was taking part in the winter workshop with the Montana chapter of Pink Boots Society, which is a professional and educational group for women who and non-binary people who work in beer and other fermented beverages. So the Montana chapter had our meeting, and we got to tour Montana Craft Malt, which is a relatively new malting facility just outside of Butte, Montana. And it was so cool to get to see the facility, because I think craft malt can seem kind of abstract. It's either like amber waves of grain or it's like in bags already at your local brewery. So to actually see the facility where they are taking the raw materials from farmers not that far away, right? Like Montana is a huge barley growing state, also other cereal grains. So to really tangibly see the way that the process happens was really cool. Also, malting facilities smell very good and are warm and humid inside during certain parts of the process. So it was like a very like cozy and fun sensory experience as well. But yeah, those kinds of stories are infinitely interesting when you get into the agricultural side of beer.
Oh yeah, and Jeff with Craft Spirit. Tell us about your current job and you know Craft Spirits.
Yeah, well, it's just we're a digital magazine for the American Craft Spirits Association, and launched just under 4 years ago. And yeah, we basically are about we're not just the magazine is not just about American craft spirits. We have a strong focus on American craft spirits, and obviously the membership of the ACSA is American, but we do a bit of international writing too, and it's just been great to see the craft spirits industry evolve and grow to now 2,700 distilleries across the U.S., which is huge. And American single malt. Since you're on the topic of malt, American single malt it has become a category unto its own. And people think of American whiskey, they think bourbon, but bourbon is so crowded as a category. And one area where people who make whiskey now, we cover all kinds of spirits, but speaking just whiskey, if you really want to make whiskey and you really want to distinguish yourself, American single malt is really kind of the direction to go, and it's on the verge of getting, a TTB definition, which is very, very exciting. So yeah, it's a very interesting time, not just for spirits, but for malt-based spirits, because people think single malt, they think Scotland, but now America has kind of come into its own for that. So that's something exciting to watch.
And I noticed that for this weekend's craft malt conference, there's quite a few whiskey and spirit speakers. The keynote this year is Dr. Rob Arnold, who's based in Texas, and he's involved in plants and flavor, but he's focused on distilleries. And there's also a single malt, American single malt session as well. So it's pretty neat. Like, what do you see in craft spirits that you like? Maybe an anecdote, something that will help our listeners identify with it.
I guess what I see is where it is in its development in relation to where craft beer was. I would say, if we were to put a timeline on it, this moment in craft spirits is about, let's call it maybe 2006, 2007 in craft beer. So it's a very exciting time. I'd say we're probably 15 years and on sort of the development curve behind where craft beer was. So we're kind of following that trajectory, and I think that's exciting to watch. And there's a lot that the industry has been able to learn from craft brewing. And now, there are a ton of craft brewers now who are adding stills to their operations. So now they're brewer distillers, and that's really exciting to watch too.
So Jeff, the salad days for craft spirits are still ahead if we're talking 2006 and 2007 beer wise.
Yeah. I guess that's what I would say. I would say maybe we're kind of at the beginning of the salad days. We're in the amuse bouche portion, I guess.
Excellent.
Okay, keep asking questions. This is good.
Well, you put me on this show with Jeff, who obviously, like, I have great respect for and great rapport with as a person. So sorry to jump in, and I'm not trying to take over the hosting duties from you, Jimmy.
Oh no, please! That's why you're here.
That's
a great question.
I wanted someone that I had a rapport with, so I'm glad you're on.
There's no hierarchy.
All right, cool. This is a democratic show. Jeff, I would be curious. Like you said that craft spirits had learned a lot from craft beers, trajectory, I suppose. What do you think are some of those lessons?
I think a big one, and it was early on. It was before I was even involved in the spirits industry. When I was still at Beverage World, I covered, the ACSA's first convention, which was in early 2014. It was probably about exactly 8 years ago, and this was several years before I ended up working for ACSA. So that was kind of weird. But so I went to that first convention, and a big part of the conversation at that was the very notion of defining craft distilling, because and one of the things they really wanted to be careful about was that sort of ceiling on how big you're allowed to get to still be considered craft. And it's about more than just the size of the operation. There's a lot of things, a lot of the same things about, independent ownership and all that too, but also size is a big part of it. And one of the things that kept coming up is everybody had witnessed how many times the BA had to raise the ceiling on their own definition because Sam Adams kept getting bigger and bigger. We ended up setting, I say we, I wasn't really part of that then, but the ACSA ended up setting the size ceiling at 750,000 proof gallons a year, which is just colossal.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a while before most of our membership even gets within spitting distance of that. So, and I think that was the biggest lesson. It was like, anticipate growth and and we had the lesson of the craft brewers growth for that. So it's like, we're going to grow. Eventually we're going to grow so big. At what point do we stop being craft? And I think setting that ceiling at, a very significant height has really kind of been good, because it's created a lot of sort of consistency in the definition where, there wasn't always that consistency with the Brewers Association.
That's a great lesson.
No shade at the Brewers Association. Of course, I love the Brewers Association. I'm just saying that, I think they did have to there were a lot of press releases went out on when they had to, every time they had to change the size
And
definition.
People had thoughts. Whereas, if you had just had a higher ceiling from the get-go, then you don't need to have that sort of hand-wringing and existential discussion, because it just is what it is. So that makes total sense.
You guys definitely are kind of on the pulse of all these trends in the industry. And Kate, how about a recent article that you've written? Is there one topic that is on your mind this week?
Oh gosh. I feel like there are just consistent themes that are happening in all my coverage, regardless of what the actual news is. So I guess, a huge one that I cannot get away from is the convergence among different types of alcohol. It used to be, maybe even as recently as 5 to 10 years ago, you were a brewery, or you were a distillery, or you were a winery. And if you were a distillery, you made distilled products, and breweries made beer, and wineries made wine. And now everyone is a beverage company that makes many types of products that may not even really be recognizable as one of those things. So take, for example, like one of the best-selling wine brands in the country, or fastest growing, is Beatbox, which comes in a Tetra Pak and is flavored like tropical punches. It's technically made from a wine base, but I don't know how many people consider it wine. I don't think its consumers necessarily consider it wine. It's more like a ready to drink cocktail or something. Obviously in beer, everyone is diversifying with all kinds of hard Mountain Dew-esque products and FMBs, and it's just kind of a wild time, and it's culminating in some really interesting ways. Just today, we got the verdict in the lawsuit between Anheuser-Busch and Constellation over whether Constellation was allowed to sell Corona hard seltzer in the US, because this all hinged on a licensing agreement from 2013 that Constellation could sell Corona beer. And ABI was suing, arguing Corona hard seltzer is not covered by Corona beer, as a licensing agreement. So it was literally a trial about, is hard seltzer beer for the purposes of that licensing agreement. I mean, these are real.
Wait, really what was the result?
Okay, so the verdict, the jury very quickly, after just about an hour of deliberations, sided with Constellation, arguing that hard seltzer is a beer related product. Therefore, it's covered by that licensing agreement, and Constellation can keep selling Corona hard seltzer. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe. No, cool. This is like the wonkiest stuff. I mean, I don't know how many people at home are hanging on the edge of their seat for the Corona hard seltzer verdict, but I sure was.
Well,
I mean, hard seltzer in general, though, it seems like, there are a lot of craft brewers out there that kind of, were like, oh, I'll never, turn their nose up at it a few years ago. And now they're all making them now because they know, where the wind's blowing in this industry.
Well, the wind blows fast, because when I first reported on this lawsuit in 2021, the, Corona hard seltzer was I think a top 5 hard seltzer brand. It's since, I think it finished 2022 selling only half of what it did the year before. So like, this is no longer the extremely hot commodity it once was. But I mean, it's just really interesting how fast consumer preferences are changing when there are all these blurring lines and new innovation all the time. Are the hard seltzers of 3 years ago going to be the hard seltzers of this year? Probably not, except for White Claw, which seems like an unstoppable juggernaut.
But does anybody remember hard root beers? That was a moment.
Sure was.
Well, I know yesterday Dave Infante was joking about just having hard juice, but it sounds like that wine company is already doing hard juice.
Yes, and now New Belgium has that. Is it wild nectar? Is I think what Dave was referring to, which literally says hard juice on the package. So we have reached whatever singularity that is.
All right. Well, we're reaching the point where I knew we'd end up talking about trends because both of you guys are huge editors in the industry. And we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes on Beer Sessions Radio. All right.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's, the pizza restaurant, is open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City and now in Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Hey, welcome back to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni. I'm the host here on Beer Sessions Radio. It's our 14th year with Heritage Radio Network. Support us and become a member at heritageradionetwork.org/donate. So we're talking about trends, and we've got two great editors and writers in the beer and spirits world, Jeff Cioletti and Kate Bernot. Thank you guys so much for joining me. The reason we're here is that Jeff has a new book out, Imbibing for Introverts, and I think almost every one of his books he's come on to Beer Sessions Radio and talked about. But we were just talking about trends. I knew we were going to go there with both of you, because I do read your articles, Kate, so I appreciate it. But like trends versus timelines, and I want Jeff to answer too. So with trends and timelines, let's each of you pick a category or some other thing that's measured, and like how often it gets looked at. You know, people look at whatever stock indexes, whatever, every quarter, let's say. And then who really wants to know? And why is it so much news? I do notice that so much of beverage media is covering big trends and big numbers.
Jeff, do you want to take that first, or you want me to?
You go first. I'm not quite sure the question anyway, so I want to hear you answer. I'm not quite sure
the question either.
Well, I'll tell you where I took this, and then we'll see if it makes any sense. I guess the reason that it feels, I mean, yes, like by its nature, you know, journalism and reporters, like we cover news. New is in the word, and often it's a luxury to get the chance to kind of look at something that is more established and say, how is this going? How has this trend progressed? Is it still what it was, a few years ago? And I feel lucky that I get to do a lot of that reporting for Good Beer Hunting Sightlines. The editorial team there likes those kinds of check-in stories, and I enjoy them greatly as well, because I think it is worth remembering, like, hey, hard root beer, where'd that go? What happened to that? But in terms of the pace of how the pace of like data that I'm looking at, for example, for the reporting I do for Good Beer Hunting, I can look at IRI data, which is chain retail scans. So if you go to the grocery store, you go to a packaged liquor store or a Costco big box store, and you scan a package of beer, that data goes somewhere. It goes to this massive database that collects all that raw data, and then people, analysts, reporters can slice and dice it to answer questions about what's popular and what's not. That data gets updated monthly on a 4-week basis. So like the beverage trade media is on a 4-week, every 4 weeks they're looking at scans. And like, that's really fast. And sometimes there are just weird anomalies. And I think it's dangerous to read too much into 4-week fluctuations, because, for example, there was kind of a big dip in how Modelo's sales were doing a few months ago in a 4-week period. And it was because like California had historic flooding. So like, of course, people aren't going out to buy their favorite beer when it's like the water's up to their doorstep. So I think it's dangerous to get too in the weeds on the 4-week scans, at least for the type of reporting that I do. And that's why, people like Jeff and what I aspired to be is a person with a deep repository of perspective and knowledge about the industry, so that you can sort of separate those blips from, you have some perspective, right, on the industry to be able to sort the blips from what's a real movement. I don't know. That's where I took that question.
That's a great one. Remember, it's not the question, it's the answer. So
okay, well, I'm glad I came up with something.
It's all softball. So because I'm learning too. I actually asked the question. If I knew what the answer was, I'd have a better question. So, so Jeff, for you, trends, timelines.
I mean, I really like what Kate said about sort of divining like a blip from an actual trend, because in pretty much every beverage industry I've covered, everybody is always kind of trying to figure out what the next big thing is, and they're always anointing the next big thing a little too prematurely, and it ends up being a blip. So I know a few years ago, like I'm, in spirits, I've been pretty passionate about the brandy category lately. And there were a lot of articles 4 or 5 years ago, mostly in mainstream media, saying brandy is the next big thing. And it was like, wait, slow your roll. They're saying it's the next whiskey or whatever. And everyone was sort of like, yeah, it's getting some great press, but the reality of it is, yes, the category is growing, but it's going to never be anywhere near as big as whiskey, mainly because of the cost and availability of the raw materials. When you're making something out of fruit, it's a lot more expensive than making something out of grain. And, we've already got a pretty significant whiskey drinking culture in the United States. So many mainstream consumers don't even know what brandy is. So, you kind of have to like hold your horses on that. And this is coming from me because I want my next book to be about brandy. But the reality is, it's a niche within a niche at this point. But I will say, I am, part of one of the things I too have to look at industry data. I mean, IRI can be somewhat instructive for me, but like you said, it's really just major chain store scanner data, and it doesn't really give you a picture of what's going on in the on-premise. So I sometimes have to go to other sources for that, and they're always basing it on kind of the macro brands, like the macro categories, and I have to kind of try to extrapolate the craft part of it and see behind the numbers, like, what does this mean for craft? So having said that, there tends to be, everyone talks about premiumization. It's overused, but the part about that is within premiumization, that's kind of where craft exists. So, and I'm seeing some very exciting things in the gin numbers. If you look at gin overall, the category is flat to down most years. But if you look within it, you look at kind of the super premium tiers, it's up triple digits. And there's a lot of really exciting things going on in American gin. Right? I mean, global gin has just exploded. I mean, it reconquered Europe, and they're making some great stuff in Japan now. It's just the world is gin mad. And I was at BarCon in Berlin a few months ago, and Germany itself now has more than 1,000 gin brands made there, when 10 years ago, I think there were 2. So you're seeing more and more, and there's some great stuff happening in the US. There's a group of distillers who are starting to organize like their own gin guild, specific to gin. So I say keep an eye on gin. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where I'm going with this.
I was at a tasting of rye whiskeys and rye bread and things last month in Brooklyn, and Darek von Schlesman of Van Brunt Stillhouse, he was launching his gin. He was so proud. He had a barrel aged gin and a straight up gin, and I like barrel aged gin. So you're onto something. But I like brandies too. I look forward to your next book, because when I cut my teeth in the '90s, beverage buyer and sommelier type, I loved all types of brandies, and I didn't get into whiskeys until a lot later. So there's a lot of history behind it and all that. A couple of fun stuff. We're going to close out soon. Beer. So a thoughtful beer, since we're talking about, and you guys could each talk together for hours, and I want that show again another time. And yes, you can always talk on this show. But imbibing for introverts, each of us, let's just think of one thoughtful beer, since we're trying to talk about beer too. And I will say that somebody said this. I feel like it's always Jeff Allworth. It might not have been him, but the next big thing in beer is beer. And the way I feel now is I just feel like when I first got interested in beer, it wasn't for the refreshing aspect, which is one thing I love about it. It was for the variety of the classic styles, and just how I felt that there was a beer for so many different moments. And I still feel that way. And I love seeing more styles right now. So, Jeff, what's a thoughtful beer for you in one of your pubs, when you're not making cocktails? Thoughtful beer. I keep thinking of like Michael Jackson with a snifter. Maybe he was drinking brandy then. I don't know.
It's funny. If you'd asked me 10 or 15 years ago, I would have very quickly said Westmalle Triple, because I was kind of Belgian crazy. It's an amazing beer and I love it, but I've kind of gone, I don't know if I'm just rebelling against the over prevalence of IPAs or whatever, because I've never been an IPA fan, but I've been really gravitating like back to basics on everything. Like, for instance, I was at a bar that had a really decent craft. It was in Illinois, and they had a decent roster of relatively local regional crafts. But I kind of looked down into the fridge and I saw a Pilsner Urquell, and I was like, the classics are a classic for a reason. I'm like, I want a Pilsner Urquell because I think it is the gold standard for Pilsners. And it's, I kind of sort of turned my nose up at it for years because, they're owned by a macro brewery. Yeah. But it is an amazing beer, and it's the perfect example of the style. And, so I'm always kind of looking out for like that true Czech style Pilsner. And when I see Pilsner Urquell, and I don't see it as often as I used to, but when I do see it, I'm going to get one. So
That's such a good answer.
I don't know if it was the right answer, but it was.
Now I'm thinking I can tell you exactly where it was the first time I ever had unfiltered Pilsner Urquell on draft, and it was like I ordered it, drank one. I was like, I'm gonna be here all night drinking these. I think my pick, yeah, I am gonna go Belgian. My first, I was between two. Okay, I'm gonna go with Terrace Bulba from Brasserie de la Seine. This is a
Good
beer
one.
that whenever I'm drinking it, which is like not frequent, like Jeff says, like I wish I had more access to this beer or just saw it more. But when I do see it and I do order it, it's like I just want to know how they did it. You know, it's like a clock that you want to take apart and be like, how? So it's just this real hoppy, well, hoppy for Belgian by Belgian standards, pale ale. And yeah, it's just that kind of beer that I feel like I can sit and turn it over and over like an intricate clock and just think about what the choices were that went into making this beer. Or you could do none of that and really just enjoy it. But I think my enjoyment of it improves the more I do really think about like the choices the brewers made to create that beer and how it's so singular. Like it almost stands in a category by itself of like extra hoppy Belgian pale ale. Like I don't even know who would take on Terrace Bulba or say like I'm making a beer like Terrace Bulba. Like no one would dare. So to me,
It's definitely there's no session IPA that is anything like it.
Totally. So I could sit with that beer and just think about it quietly, I think, for quite some time.
Well, that brings me back to beer. The most exciting thing about beer is beer. And I'm going to say, since Jeff said we're talking unfiltered Pilsner, Mars und Gespundet, something that whenever I would get it on keg, there was a magic. There's a magic and a thoughtfulness to it. It's also just so good. It strikes many color of beers and Zwickel beers. There's so many styles of beer that it's like that extra care. And they're usually not as mass produced, but we've talked about these kind of things and this is our 14th year, and I love that we did come back and talking about beer, because the other one, I'll say another one, Aventinus, Schneider Aventinus. That was one of the first beers that really made me love beer, and that whatever it is, the Weizen Doppelbock. There's also a magic there. It also has a little kick to it, and I do remember an Oktoberfest party with a crazy German artist who was hanging from ropes, painting on a wall. I had 8 of those, and it was quite the night. So
that's say more about that night.
Well, that's the other thing now, is that with everyone talking about, you can't talk about over consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it fits the moment. It's if you're having a good experience and social, and you're in a safe place with friends, and there's a beer that's working for you, and you're in good health too. It assumes you're of a certain age and all that. There's nothing wrong with it. We've all had our initiations into responsible social drinking. And but Aventinus has a great memory for me. But there's more to talk about. But yeah, I think that's probably what we'll leave it with, especially with the North American Guild of Beer Writers. I feel like it's really opened a lot of doors for people. I love the work you're doing connecting people. Do you feel that you've given people some opportunities through that network?
I think the guild has, for sure. I'm relatively new to the position of director, but I mean, every year the guild sort of facilitates a grant called the Diversity in Beer Writing Grant, which we do in partnership with the Brewers Association and Allagash. And that grant funds the writing of articles by new and emerging writers in the beer space. So sort of working to ensure that there is a new generation of beer writers always coming through the ranks and getting opportunities to tell the stories they want to tell and investigate the things they're interested in and bring their diverse backgrounds to the reporting that they do. So that's been a really fruitful program, and I'm really looking forward to continuing that diversity in beer writing grant program going forward.
That's great. Jeff, do you want to say anything else about your new book before we close out?
Well, before I say that, I just wanted to say that Kate, there's no one more qualified to be running this organization than you. And I was absolutely over the moon when you took the reins of the guild. And you are one of the best in the business, and not just a beer writer, you're a true beer journalist, and a lot of that is lacking. So that guild is in amazingly good hands. I just want to say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, and my book is Imbibing for Introverts. Get it wherever you get books. That's all I really need to say about it.
and learn what I do love the chapter on the English pubs. So thank you. I'm going to go back to that one several more times. And we didn't talk about there's so many other beer styles. I guess we need to do more thoughtful beer style shows, because now I'm thinking about those other beers, like a really good cask of beer. And again, it's things that can be cliched, but you, Kate and Jeff, you guys know that when you have that right beer, like a Towers Spulbo or that unfiltered Pils or a real proper cask, and you can sit there for a couple hours and it's still at room temperature, right, Jeff?
Yep.
You've got your moment. So thank you so much, Jeff and Kate, for joining me here on Beer Sessions Radio. Big shout out to our engineer, Armin Spingen, who kind of makes this all work. And we'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right. Thank you. Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.